How's it going, guys? I got an update video on this bike. This is the weight reduction experiment CBR 1000RR from Honda 2011. This is just my own little personal experiment here. And the idea is a street legal bike, as light as possible, 1000cc, nothing permanently modified, and nothing, outrageously or irrationally dangerous going on here. So most everything here is bolt on, bolt off. I didn't grind down any frame parts or that sort of thing. Although when I bought the bike, somebody did cut off the back of the subframe in order to get rid of that little nub that usually you will see on the back of the tail. They just chopped that thing right off. And I probably would not have done that if it were me, but honestly, I do love the modification. It's a tailor, I believe it's a, I think it's a tailor-made carbon fiber undertail. Although I might be wrong on that brand, I gotta double check that. But basically what they did was they cut off the nub and then they fiberglassed it and painted it black to make it a little more sleek in the back, which I do appreciate, and it looks pretty good. So anyways, that is the only permanent modification that was made to this bike, and it wouldn't be that hard to swap out the subframe. Matter of fact, I do believe this bike would look better with a black subframe and a black swing arm, but I've never gotten around to bothering with that. Somebody did paint the frame black, which I actually do like, but the paint does wear down and I have to touch it up from time to time. So anyways, the other modification here that's a safety issue, well, it's really not a safety issue, but technically speaking it's a safety issue, is the fact that I have one brake removed, or one caliper to be more accurate. The front right caliper's removed and the front right rotor's removed, and I've got a stainless steel brake line, just one brake line running to the stock master cylinder. And that modification, I did that many years ago to my 2011 Gixxer 750, just out of curiosity. It saves 3 pounds of rotational weight, 3 pounds of unsprung weight, and another pound to half a pound of brake line and brake fluid weight. And it provides like a stiffer feel on your lever. And if the bike has a lot of weight reduction and you're not riding at 200 miles an hour with a passenger on the back, you're not going to really notice a difference, to be honest with you. Matter of fact, it'll probably feel better. Usually when I jump on somebody's stock bike, I have to go through an adjustment period because their brakes are so squishy and they feel weak, and I'm used to like a nice firm grip, and I'm used to the bike stopping really aggressively, but not in a way that's like it doesn't have like overbite or anything like that. It feels fantastic, to be honest with you. And same thing goes for that rear brake. I removed the rear brake reservoir, and I installed an ultralight rear rotor, and the pedal feel on the brake improved. For whatever reason, these rotors, I actually prefer them to the stock rotors, but they're also 0.8 pounds lighter, which is rotational unsprung weight. And anytime you can save a pound of rotational unsprung weight for like $55, that's a win. So I've been putting those on every single bike. All my friends' bikes, I recommend them. They look cool and they save some weight. It's probably one of the cheapest mods, probably the cheapest, most cost-effective performance mod you could possibly do to a modern sport bike, to be honest with you. Not that you're going to feel some huge difference from doing that, but technically speaking, I mean, you'll feel more difference from that than from carbon fiber fairings, for example. Carbon fiber fairings cost like $4 per gram saved, and it's sprung weight, and it's not rotating, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the brake mods that were done, and it feels fantastic. Technically speaking, it's unsafe. I don't recommend it. Don't do it. But wow, what a nice improvement. So another thing we've got here obviously is carbon fiber rims. The rear rim saved about 4.4 pounds and the front rim saved about 2.6, something along those lines. So it worked out to be about 7 pounds of rotating unsprung weight for about $3,300. I believe that works out to be somewhere in the range of about $1 per gram saved. And because it's rotating unsprung and 4 times cheaper than carbon fiber fairings, if you have the $3,000 and you've got a liter bike and you want it improved, that is a fantastic performance mod. It sounds ridiculous, but that spreadsheet doesn't lie. It's a great value. It's a lot better of a value than, for example, that exhaust right there. That's a titanium Akrapovich racing style exhaust. It weighs about 5.8 pounds. And I think I got like, I want to say $1,300, but it's like a $2,500 exhaust. I got a really good deal on it. I found it on eBay brand new. And I actually had 2 of them, so I swapped the titanium canister with the carbon canister off of a stainless version, which combined together made it even lighter. So that's how I got it down to about 5.8 pounds for the exhaust. And I love the titanium anyway. It is a little difficult to work with compared to stainless, but you know, for the price for that particular deal, that was fantastic. And you can see I got my passenger pegs on right now. It's because I was riding a passenger, but over the years I've ridden many passengers on this bike. Even though the subframe was modified, even though I have the suspension settings for, you know, on 1 or 2 instead of the stock position, which is usually about 4. So it's, you know, actually relieved a little stress off of the spring to help try to get some more travel out of this bike, even though it's been reduced in weight by 90 something pounds. So when you add a passenger, you're actually bringing the suspension back into range where you might want to have your back on your stock setting. But you know, to be honest with you, suspension, as big of a deal as it is on the racetrack, honestly, in practice, I gotta say, like, if you give me a bike with a pair of crappy tires on it, like, I cannot ride around that. But a bad suspension, you can ride around it a little bit. And not to say this is a bad suspension, but when you put a passenger on the back and your preload settings are on 1, you're probably not in a wonderful range. You know, it's probably a little too soft, I would imagine. But it's not an issue in practice at all. I even had one young fella, was 14 years old, wanted to go for a ride. He was 275 pounds. We put him on the back. Obviously, we put a passenger pillion seat back there, but yeah, it was no problem. We drove around. We had a good time. It was fine. I'm about 160 pounds with gear, so yeah, between the two of us, we had this thing loaded up, really loaded up, and it still was just fine. It didn't bottom out. It was no issues. It could still corner just fine. We didn't go crazy, of course, with a 275-pound kid on the back. Anyway, I digress, so let's continue. So basically, the carbon fiber rims were a fantastic upgrade and a good bang for the buck, and it improves every single thing about the bike. It makes it easier for the suspension to keep the tires in contact with the ground. It improves acceleration, deceleration, cornering, gas mileage, tire life, brake life. It is a lot more effective in every category than, say, for example, like a power mod, which a power mod usually will increase your acceleration, maybe your top speed, but it'll actually decrease your gas mileage, and increased power actually generally it'll put more of a challenge onto your suspension, and maybe reduce reliability, reduce gas mileage, reduce tire and brake life, yada yada. So most of us go for power mods. You know, I recommend that's the whole theory behind this bike. What happens if we just put an emphasis on weight reduction instead, because it improves the bike in all those other categories, and if you take it to an extreme. So another thing I did, a little strange, I took off one of the, you know, radiator fans. There was 2 of them in there. I took one off, and honestly, when I'm at a stoplight, which I rarely ever find myself at a stoplight, but if I were, I turn the bike off. I don't sit there and let it heat up to 225 degrees. But for the most part, I just avoid stoplights. And worst case scenario, when I'm at the drag strip, for example, and you're in a staging lane, I do the same thing. I'll turn the bike off when I'm waiting. Not a big deal. And even if I didn't turn the bike off, the single fan is enough to keep it under 225. I just try to keep the bike lower in temperature if possible anyways. So that's another thing that saved a little bit of weight. I think that saved like a little over a pound, something like that. And it's sprung weight, so it's not a huge deal, but man, it does add up. You know, I think this bike is stock, it's 448, and as it sits right now, it's about 353. So that's about 95 pounds of weight reduction relative to stock. And again, that's, you know, 20 pounds of that is just gas, because I ride this bike at about 1 gallon or 1.1, maybe 1.2 gallons. I ride it for 30-45 minutes, and I come home, park it, and that's it. So I don't need to, I'm in my reserve all the time, basically, with the bike. Once you get down to, when you got your last 0.3 gallons, maybe 0.4 gallons in that tank, you can no longer accelerate at full throttle, because you'll start the fuel pump, and you can't ride out wheelies, of course. You can do short power wheelies, but that's it. That's something that maybe some tank foam, I don't know if it'd be possible to do with like a tank foam to help reduce that issue. But most of the time, when my bike starts blinking, you know, I got 1 gallon left, and it gets down to like, it'll say 0.7 because it's got 0.3, 0.4 left in it. At that point, I'm done. I just cruise home. But up until that point, I like riding with low amount of fuel, because it is noticeable, man. Believe me, if you grab this bike and fill it up with 4.5 gallons or 5 gallons and take it out for a rip, you will definitely feel the difference between having a full tank and not having a full tank. It's a nice little, if you can swing it. I mean, if I'm going for a long drive somewhere, I got to go to the drag strip, I just put in like an extra gallon to get there. So it's not a huge not a huge challenge. And how to know like just how much to put in, I just open the tank and shine a flashlight in there when I'm pouring gas in, and I make sure I get it right to where I want it. It's just a little ways above the fuel pump, basically the top of the fuel pump. That's where I fill up to get the reserve light to kick off. Then as I'm riding the next few miles, the reserve light will kick on, and I know I'm down to about 1.1 gallon. And that's a great place to be in terms of weight. So another thing that's really weird about this bike is the tire size. So on the front, at the moment I've got a Dunlop Q3 Plus 120/60/17, and so the 120/60 is got a shorter sidewall than your typical 120/70 sport bike tire. But the upside is the Dunlop Q3 Plus 120/70 is actually about 10 pounds, and the 120/60 is about 8 pounds. So you're, a 2-pound weight reduction rotating outside circumference. That's a lot of difference in terms of performance. And as far as like the downside, okay, you've got a little bit less sidewall to protect your tire, which hopefully your suspension is doing that job for the most part anyways. And secondly, you've got less lean angle. Maximum lean angle is reduced. However, when it comes to the front tire, I don't know if you guys noticed, but on a 120/70, it's really hard to end up using your entire tire on the street. I think that generally is because when when you use your front tire coming into a corner at maximum speed, brake at the very last second, and then slam that bike over, that is going to use a lot more front tire than on a street. Typically on the street, if you want to survive, you probably don't come in that hot on your corners. You can come out at 100%. You can't come in at 100%. So your front tire doesn't get as much use anyways. I've never had a problem being on a 120/60, and I've done probably, I don't even know, 10, 15,000 power wheelies, many of which I accidentally closed the throttle too fast or something and just slammed the front end down over and over and over on these carbon fiber rims. So it's not a problem in terms of protecting the carbon fiber. It's not a problem in terms of suspension. Sometimes I make mistakes and I slam the front end down. It's never been a problem. And so yeah, 120/60 save a lot of weight, and yeah, make your bike feel a little bit more. It's got a little bit more of a flat profile, but just like anything, you get used to it quick. And the bike is so light and it's like a chipmunk, the way it just dives back and forth left and right. So it's not an issue at all that the front tire has got a little more of a flat profile to it. The weight savings alone are wonderful, and when you combine that with the weight savings of the rotor and the rim, you got a really super light front end, which makes it easy to control when you're on one wheel. So it's just it feels more comfortable on one wheel when that front end is that light. So, and also, of course, like everything else, it improves tire life, brake life, gas, miles per gallon, suspension performance, acceleration and deceleration, and cornering. So it's wonderful to get some weight reduction, and basically it's something that most bikes won't have. So it kind of gives you an edge over other bikes, you could say. So when it comes to rear tire, right now I've got a Dunlop Q3 Plus 180/55. Again, that's a unusual size for a 1000cc sport bike. Usually you would have a 190/50, and a lot of people are putting 190/55, but a lot of people are also disregarding the differences in weight. Now, I'm not saying that you should put a 180/55 on here. You certainly can, but it will reduce your cornering. In this case, that is not that cool. I got to be honest with you. This bike would be a lot better with a 190/50, and if you do like a Michelin, for example, like a Pilot Power RS, which I think now is discontinued, and the 190/50 size is actually just as light as this Q3 Plus in the 180/55 size. But the 190/50 is going to give you a little more maximum lean angle, and that is awesome. So I'm really just doing this to get rid of that tire so I can switch back to the 190/50. And the 190/50 120/60 combo is actually pretty nice. And it's worth mentioning that these tires I'm talking about are 13.2 pounds, between 13 to 13.2 pounds when they're brand new. On the rear tire size, the 180/55 Q3 Plus, the 190/50 Power RS. But to make things even sweeter, Michelin recently upgraded or changed their Power RS to the Power 5, and my buddy got one in 190/50 size. We weighed it, and I think it was like 11.5 pounds. So that is an additional almost 2 pounds of weight reduction relative to, I was shocked. I was absolutely mind-blown. They did an amazing job getting that tire super light. And also I've noticed that when you're mounting Michelin tires, it's a little, I mount these by hand, so it's a little easier to work with the Michelins typically than it is to work with the Dunlops. And I also might say that the Michelins have a little better cold weather grip than the Q3 Plus. And believe me, the Q3 Plus has awesome cold weather grip, but the Power RS is, I would say it's a little bit better in cold weather grip, but you're also going to have, I think, ultimately a little bit less miles out of your Power RS or your Power 5 than you're going to get out of the Q3 Plus. So those are some things to consider. But when these tires are worn down to the max, that rear tire is going to go down from 13 pounds to about 10 pounds when it's time to change the tire out. And the front tire is going to come down from 8 pounds to about 6 to 6.2 pounds, something in that range. So if your tires are getting low, but you're still passing inspection, but you still have tread, you know, you actually have a significant weight reduction relative to when the tires were brand new. So if you're trying to get like the absolute maximum performance out of your bike, you know, that's going to happen when you've got your tires are worn down a little bit, believe it or not. So I do, because I don't put a lot of miles on, I actually do sometimes buy used tires if I can find them cheap on eBay, so that I'm always spending time like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 pounds lower than I would be if I was constantly using brand new tires. Just another little weird thing that I like to do. What else we got? We've got the ECU Flash. So ECU Flash allows you to avoid having the extra weight of a fuel control system, like a Bazaz or a Power Commander. And it also removes, you can remove your pair valve, you can remove your exhaust valve, motor. It allows you to, I think you can avoid having the Bazaz throttle position sensor. They call it the Z-bomb. So it gets rid of the need for that. So a variety of little doodads and gizmos that you can remove or that you don't need if you do an ECU Flash. And honestly, at this point, I can't imagine not doing an ECU Flash. I mean, you get timing, a new timing map, ignition timing map. You get you know, the European version, and you get upper and lower fuel injector control, and you know, it's so simple. It's such a more simple and elegant solution, and you can just mail your ECU out and get a pretty decent map that way. Or if you want to get fancy, you can either go to the dyno or you can use auto tune if you have a exhaust with the 18 millimeter O2 wideband O2 sensor hole. So you can just do your own, make your own custom maps that way for like $700. That does require a little bit of technical know-how, but I haven't done that. I have a mail order ECU Flash. I got it from North Texas Superbikes, a Monkey. Now they think they're called Monkey Moto, but also Dan O's Performance out in California is also well regarded for that. They do a great job too. What else we got? So the front fairings are removed, and the air intake tubes are removed. That definitely will hurt you in terms of aerodynamics when you're at, you know, high up in the, you know, triple digits. So at the drag strip, this bike traps at about 145 with the air intake tubes and about 143 without them. The ET remained the same at about 10 flat. That's at about 2,500 density altitude. So if you correct that, you're talking like 9.7 maybe at 148 miles per hour. So basically I'm losing 2 miles an hour when I remove those air intake tubes, but I'm getting the same ET. So my power to weight ratio has gotten worse when I get rid of those tubes, no doubt. But in practice, my ET is the same from 0 to 150 miles an hour. So on the street, I usually go 0 to 120 in theory, allegedly. Now I don't go beyond that typically. I mean, this bike's geared at like 165 to 170 miles an hour is maximum speed the way this bike is geared anyways, because I took a tooth off the front and I added 1 or 2 to the back. So I never get into those kinds of speeds. That's not really what I'm into. And so I just, there's nothing to be, and we're talking like, I think 18 pounds was the total weight reduction when I did that project for the front end. It's not to say that the side fairings weigh 18 pounds, but when you add up all the stuff I was able to remove by doing this, it worked out, you know, in that one lump, I saved about 18 pounds of weight reduction, and most of it is all sprung weight, so it's not a huge deal, but it is nice, I'll tell you. I couldn't see a downside other than the fact that it's very different looking. Some people think it's ugly, some people say it looks like a roach. I don't care, I'm just looking for performance. So there are a lot of other things I've done to this bike that I really can't remember off the top of my head. That, you know, I have my bar ends are out, the bar end weights are out. I made a custom headlight out of a bunch of different headlights to try to get it as light as possible. Like I said, I removed my rear brake reservoir. I have a mini front brake reservoir. I keep my coolant low in the reservoir tank. I got stick-on blinkers. My license plate is zipped on. It's literally zip tied in place instead of, I don't have any kind of bracket on it. Everything is geared towards being lightweight. And one of the big ones is the 520 kit. So if you want to have maximum weight reduction during a 520 kit, you got to look at a couple different chains. The EK 3D GP is one of my favorites because it's black. And the DID ERV3 is another favorite because it's a little cheaper and it's almost as light, but it's gold. So if you don't mind the gold color, DID ERV3 is probably the best value, and it's almost as strong, almost as light as the EK 3D GP, but I think it's like $40 cheaper or $45 cheaper. So you're talking about a 1 pound weight reduction on the chain, roughly. And in regards to the sprocket, I like to recommend the aluminum sprockets, even though sometimes they get a bad name, but believe me, man, I thrash this bike. I do ride it brutally. I slam the throttle open and closed every single time I ride. I'm doing hundreds of power wheelies and slamming the front end all over the place, railing on the brakes, and just mashing the suspension. I go crazy on this thing, and the chain has been absolutely thrashed. And throughout all that, I haven't seen any wear on the rear sprocket. Which is in this case is it's a Renthal, and it's one of their high-end aluminum sprockets. They might be a little hard to find sometimes, but in this case I had to get a specific sprocket for the BST rear rim, and the specific sprocket size for the carbon rim is different than it is for the stock 1000RR rim. So I've tried a couple different ones, and again, I haven't seen any wear on the rear sprocket. I will see a little bit of wear on the front sprocket. Those are chromoly steel. I get the Renthal weight reduction. They have the whole weight relief holes drilled into them, and the front sprocket saves about 1/4 pound. The rear sprocket saves about 0.8 pound, and like I said, that rear rotor saves about 0.8. Then you have other things like aluminum sprocket nuts. You can have titanium rear brake rotor bolts, and if you have a stock rim, you can get titanium sprocket studs. That'll save some weight. Those things are all rotating, they're unsprung, and the price per gram saved is actually not bad. Even though it's a very small weight savings, the value is there. So I highly recommend doing that, and you'll save something like close to 3 pounds. I removed my front fender, my rear fender. I've got a lithium battery in there that's about 1 pound. It's a size, I think it's a size 5. So it's the same size battery I use on a dirt bike, basically, and it's never been an issue. If you have a hard time starting your bike and you've got a tiny little lithium battery, you just try starting it a few times and it'll warm up the battery, and then it'll fire up. Or you can turn on your headlight to help warm the battery up a little bit and then try starting it. So if you get into some real cool air and the battery loses its mojo, you can actually warm it up to get the bike to start. So that's kind of, that's worst case scenario. But even with a size 5 battery, 1 pound, I've just been loving it. It's been great. I put them in every bike. I recommend them to everybody. They're like 70, 75 bucks on eBay. I use the WPS brand. Awesome weight savings there. It's like, well, the 1000RR comes with a small battery anyways, but it's a nice weight savings.